I think we have the board. We might as well go ahead and start the meeting. It's an emergency short agenda meeting, so we don't have Pledge of Allegiance or warrants or anything like that. But we did add a public comment to the agenda that was sent out. I guess technically that takes a board vote to change after it was sent out, but so we'll go ahead and do that quickly. I would motion to add a public comment before the board discussion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Great. We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake? Did we just lose Jake?
He's showing up on the participants.
Yeah, he
I
just
think he turned off his
video
monitor.
instead of his
Yeah.
microphone. Jake, how do you vote on adding a public comment? Can you just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down while you work on sound? We'll complete the call while we wait for Jake. So Patrick, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye.
Yeah.
There he's coming again. Jake, can you hear us? Still can't hear?
All right, if you guys don't mind, I grabbed my daughter's phone.
That's working. We can hear you.
All right.
So we were voting, the other four of us all voted to add public comment. How do you vote?
Yes, I vote aye. I was actually going to make that suggestion, so thank you.
Yep. I think a bunch of us spotted that. Certainly important to do at a time like this. So, okay, so really the next item is public comment. And just, so a couple of background things. So on the agenda for today is discussion of the MPAA recommendation for mask guidance, and specifically the MPAA has two components. One component is that student athletes, while practicing or competing outdoors, do not have to wear a mask. Does not change the rules for sitting on the bench or inside. The other component is that spectators who are outdoors and socially distanced don't have to wear a mask. This, of course, follows a change from Maine guidance, which basically says outdoors and distanced does not have to wear a mask. They're not they haven't come out with guidance on exactly what they mean by distance or what counts as a large group. The capacity for meeting is I think 75% of capacity, but that's I think not limiting for us. The US CDC still has a guidance that says this applies to vaccinated but not unvaccinated people. So right now there's a bit of a contradiction in the guidances that are out there. I know some people have said, we'll follow the scientists, but it's always harder when the scientists have different opinions. We are not discussing today school outdoor mask, which would mostly be recess And also probably outdoor classes. I think outdoor lunch already the practice is no mask for an obvious reason, but the others. So we're not discussing those, but if somebody wants to mention either of those specific contexts in public comment today, I'll certainly allow it because we're going to be talking about that on Tuesday, which is our next regularly scheduled board meeting. So with that, I'll just remind you on public comment. Number one, this is not social media. This is a government meeting in a small town. So civility is important. And well, I'll go further. Civility and respect is required. You don't have to respect the board. We're public servants, but the staff and the other people speaking, you do have to respect. So that's expected. And I think that there are enough people that I'm going to need to put a time limit on and ask for a speakers list. So if you would like to speak, please type your name and something like would like to speak in the chat section, and I will start calling off the list. And I'm going to put it, because this is a fairly short meeting, I'm going to put a 90-second time limit. That's long enough for an Oscar speech. You can say that's a good benchmark or a bad benchmark, but it's typical of what we use. So I'm going to give a 90-second response, and I'm going to just start calling people off the chat list that I see. So with that, we'll go ahead and open up public comment. And just for people who are new here, you're welcome to type anything you want into the chat, but the board doesn't necessarily have time to read it. It's the spoken word is what we're following. Okay, Liam, I see that you're first on the list, so go ahead. You got 90 seconds.
Thank you. Okay, so for those who don't know me, I'm Liam Farrell. I'm a senior at Orono High School and a three-sport athlete competing in soccer, indoor track, and outdoor track in the spring. I think we're all brought here today with the common goal in mind of the safety of our students, staff and faculty, and community. And we cannot ignore the prevalence of COVID-19, especially now. Every day I go to track with my teammates, and we have a quick team meeting, warm up, do core, workout, all socially distanced and masked. And I think it's an understatement to say that we have excelled with COVID protocols in athletics this year. The students at OHS have been more than understanding that this season is contingent on our ability to stay safe. Furthermore, I'm happy to say that on the track team, the majority of those who are eligible to receive the vaccine have. We're a safe, proactive group that just wants to do things right. We follow the MPA and Maine CDC guidance all year, and to my knowledge, there's not been a single transmitted case through outdoor team sports. This includes in the fall when we played our sports season unmasked. And as more people get vaccinated, the time has come to not ease protocols, but rather amend them and to take a step back to ask if certain blanket rules are really reasonable. In track and field, I run distance, specifically mile and 2 mile. So it is this mask rule that perhaps affects us most out of any athletes. Just yesterday, I competed in a track meet at Hamden Academy, where my 2 other distance team members and I were the only ones racing wearing a mask, meaning all surrounding schools have followed the new MPA guidance. After speaking with the coaching staff and students on the team, we actually proposed something safer: masks on at all times except when competing. And the evidence shows that doing this is safe. The CDC requires that if a person is within 6 feet of a positive case of COVID for more than 15 minutes, they must self-quarantine. But there's no track and field event where we are within 6 feet of an individual for 15 minutes. So this prompts a question: what is so wrong with removing our masks for 5 minutes while we run, or the 12-second 100-meter dash, or the 6-second long jump? We are still masked in the team area and when we aren't competing and when we're within 6 feet of others. And the best part about this is it's optional. Athletes can choose to remove their masks for a race or leave them on, completely their preference. And this goes for practices as well. The goal is not to
Sorry, I got to cut you off. I did extend the time to 2 minutes because 90 was feeling that. I'll give 2 minutes to everybody.
Okay.
But any last 5-second wrap up?
Yeah, I'm just saying that the goal is not to be rash or forceful, but to just create an environment where Orono athletes, in accordance with Maine CDC and MPA guidance, can compete on the same level playing field as everybody else. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So Mike, you put your name in next. I'm happy to let you speak now, although you will have an opportunity to speak later to probably get questions asked. But if you want to start now, go ahead with your 2 minutes for now, Mike.
Here, Liam. Nice job. I just want to say that we are one of 2 schools in the area that started in July 6th. And the reason that we did that was that we were trusting science. We've taken the attitude all year long that rather than concentrate on the things that we can't do, then let's concentrate on the things that we can do safely. And science has guided us through that. And we voted to have a fall sports season. We followed the protocols. We voted to have a winter sports season, and that was probably the most contradictory season, moving indoors. And we voted to play sports for these kids outside in the spring. And all of that has been based on following science. So science is telling us right now that we can make some modifications and be outside without masks and following protocols. And all I ask is that we continue to do what we've done all year long, and that's listen to science and allow these kids to compete without the masks on. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Leo next up in the list.
Hey guys, I do want to say thank you for scheduling this meeting. And I also want to say great job, Liam. Thank you for speaking. And just one of the things that Liam mentioned, and I don't know if everyone knew this or not, but we've already had our athletes in this situation where our opponents have adopted the new NPA guidance, and we were masked and they were not. I do have faith that we're going to continue the course that we've been following, state guidance, which we've done all year, and get these masks hopefully off our athletes. Little reminder, obviously last fall, our athletes did not compete with masks on. And I think we had a super successful fall season. I've listened to some of Tuesday's meetings. I know you guys touched on this a little bit. And I wanted to, I guess, one board member, I guess, effectively suggested that the state guidance be the floor and that we should be taking higher precautions. I wanted to just point out that, this is coming from a parent of a K2 student. And we all know, in Orono at least, we've been fortunate. Our K2 students have had the option of full in-person, face-to-face education for 5 days a week, all year. So I don't think, I'm not sure there's a true appreciation for what our kids, and by that I mean middle school, high school kids, have lost over these past 15 months. There's been graduation, dances, proms, sporting events, literally being able to talk to your friends at lunch, being in a classroom with kids. It's all been lost over these past 15 months. And that has been based on just following the state guidance. So I would say that's really not the floor. I think the next pandemic we're going to be dealing with is the mental health crisis that these past 15 months has created with our kids. So I would ask, as a board, please be cognizant that we serve a broad community. And
So that's 2 minutes.
6-year-olds are different than 16-year-olds. So again, thank you guys for having this meeting so quickly.
Thank you. Next up, I have Bill Farrell.
Apologies, I was having a little trouble with my internet. Hey, well, thanks all. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So as you know, I'm Bill Farrell, not a long-time resident of Orono, and I have 5 kids in each of the schools. I really appreciate the difficult job of the school board and the superintendent and her team during this pandemic. So thank you all very much. I also appreciate that you've all historically espoused 2 guiding principles: scientific evidence as a basis for decisions, and the use of objective criteria by aligning with guidance from the state of Maine and the Maine Principals Association. So as you know, the US CDC looks at the country as a whole. So policy guidance at the national level is generalized in nature. So therefore, each state, such as Maine, has its own CDC to contextualize in the circumstances of each state. So here, as we all know, under Dr. Shaw, so to date, our school's approach has been grounded, appropriately in guidance from Governor Mills, Dr. Shaw, and his team. To now diverge from this and require children to continue to wear masks outside is not grounded in scientific evidence, in the reality of our circumstances in Maine, or in the precedent set by this board and our school system. Beyond this is the reality that people in our town and in our neighboring towns, as well as on athletic teams across the state, are already going maskless. So given this reality, continuing to require our kids to wear masks will have little tangible health effect in the face of so many unmasked people, particularly if they're simply taking off their masks once they leave the school grounds, as is allowed within the letter and the spirit of Maine law. So without a firm evidentiary base, acknowledgement in the face of behavioral realities in and outside of our community, and adherence to our own precedents, there's a risk that retention of the outdoor mask mandates at schools
So
would
that's
would
2 minutes. Can you wrap up?
Yep, would appear ideological and dogmatic. So I respectfully, ask the board, as you've heard some other voices, including from my son, Liam, I'm very proud of you, to remove the mask requirement at Orono schools, sporting events, and other extracurricular activities that occur outside. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, I have Catherine.
I think the people who have gone before me have expressed my views very well, but if you don't know who I am, I'm Catherine Thibodeau. I have 3 children at Orono High School. I've operated a nonprofit healthcare facility here in town for the past 24 years. I am a firm believer in public health. I am a firm believer in mask use. I am a firm believer in vaccines. I'm not somebody coming to speak to you as some sort of rogue person. So I think it's important for the school board to understand that people that are supportive of removing the mask mandate during practice and competition crosses sort of all spectrums of Orono citizens and parents in Orono schools. I also want to point out, I was listening on the Tuesday meeting, and I'm sure as board members, you guys are aware of this, but it's been made clear to me that there is no outdoor mask mandate in the town of Orono. And so if that is still a question, I would, implore you to investigate that and get some information on that. Brian had mentioned at the beginning the complications of following science when science doesn't always agree. I think Bill mentioned it very well, that Maine has a certain different circumstances than if you're looking at the totality of the nation. And in my work, I think the most important thing that I have done to mitigate COVID spread, which has been we have done a tremendous job at my agency and my facility at that, is to pick who we're going to follow, what guidance we're going to follow, and stick with it. It gives people predictability and stability. And I just, as a school board, I think you guys have done a good job doing that over the course of the past 15 months. And I would encourage you to continue to do that. I would also point out that nobody is requiring anybody to remove a mask, and that it's a voluntary thing. And I'm going to just end by saying I'm super proud of Liam speaking up for that. And I think that that just shows the great education kids are getting here in Orono, and I would just implore you to listen to what he had to say.
Thank you. Don, you're next. Got to unmute.
Thank you. I want to reiterate what Leo said earlier. I really appreciate the board getting this meeting together within 24 hours so we could, unravel what's been going on for the last 13 months. And I really appreciate your efforts. I think it's already been said in my book. The MPA has made a decision. The governor has made a decision. And I've wondered for a long time, if you have, say baseball, if you've got 2 outfielders that are more than 90 feet away, why do they have to wear a mask? And I had this conversation with Paul earlier this year, Paul Kalina. The mask sometimes is a hindrance. If you're chasing a fly ball and it goes up to your eye and the ball comes down, you could be hit. We've got guys wearing sunglasses in the outfield. The glasses are fogging up. We're not together for not even close to 5 minutes. So if you look at the science of it all, it makes sense that being separate while you're on a field is not a problem with a mask. We don't need a mask. You come into the dugout like University of Maine baseball and softball, you wear a mask. It's that simple. You got it in your back pocket. You know, this is, to me, a long time coming, and it's a relatively easy decision. It really is, and I appreciate Liam speaking up so graciously and well. That, to me, this is an easy decision, and I really appreciate the board making a quick decision, coming together with this decision, and let's unravel it and let's move forward. So whatever I have said, could say, it's already been said. So I think this is long overdue, and I appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Maggie, you're up next.
Thanks. So I'm speaking from the perspective of a parent with elementary school children, and I think that probably the playground and sports are probably two entirely separate things. But if we're talking about removing masks on playgrounds, I would be very uncomfortable, my children being outside at recess with a large group not wearing masks. The reason for my discomfort with that is I did listen to the CDC briefing with Dr. Shaw, and what he said is, well, it's not necessary to wear a mask when you're out and about on a walk. If you're going to stop, talk to somebody, if you're going to congregate, if you're going to be within 6 feet of somebody, if you're going to be in a group setting, even if you're outside, you should still put your mask back on. And given that young children aren't easily able to understand the social distancing requirements, to stay 6 feet apart, I think to just let them play more normally, I would really, really prefer that they have their masks on. The kids have such a short amount of time left in school. The younger kids have been really fortunate to have as much in-person time as they have. I think they're quite used to wearing their masks outside. I would be so much more comfortable continuing to send my kids to ASA if we just kept them wearing their masks outside. And I know that just because they can take them off doesn't mean they have to, but with little kids, you know, it's putting my kid at risk if another kid's not wearing their mask, especially considering that absolutely none of them are vaccinated because they can't be vaccinated yet. So that's my 2 cents on that. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Paul, you're up next.
Hi, thank you. I just a brief comment. As for those of you that don't know me, I work as an athletic trainer in sports medicine at the university. And obviously, we've been dealing with this, you know, on a daily basis all year. My brief comment basically is, you know, it's really our strong belief that any spread that we've had of COVID has not happened on the playing field. Or on the basketball court or the ice rinks or, you know, anything else. I think, you know, there's a much higher risk in more confined spaces such as the locker rooms and buses and, you know, and meal tables than anything else. So, you know, just, you know, I you know, agree with, you know, with most of the comment here this afternoon. I guess that's all I've got to say. But thank you to the board, you know, for pulling this together so quickly.
Great, thank you. Ellen, I see your hand is raised. You're up next.
Sure. For the people that don't know me, I'm Ellen White. I have a degree in public health and I'm a medical doctor. I also wanted to comment briefly. I was at the track meet yesterday at Hamden, and the different schools had different rules. And it was amazing how good the kids who were allowed to take their masks off were. They would take them off right before their race began and put them on immediately when they crossed the finish line. And I don't see that our kids can't do something like that. I also do know that more than half of the kids on the track team are vaccinated. And I would guess that high school students, many of them are vaccinated at this point. So as far as high school is concerned, I think that this is a reasonable time to lift the rules.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else in the queue for public comment, but we did receive several letters. That's not a big part of our culture to read things out loud, but with the short notice of this meeting and with the fact it's being held during the workday, I did feel it was important to include people through that channel as well. I think Patrick and Mark both have some letters to read. Patrick, you want to go ahead and read yours, and then Mark, you can go next.
Yeah, sure. I received three requests from people who wanted to be here today but couldn't because of the timing and short notice and work commitments. The first one is from Lori Lomler, and I'll just read verbatim what she sent me. As parents of young children, one of whom really struggled emotionally when school closed last March, we want to know and trust that our school will take measures to keep our children as safe as possible. We chose remote learning this year to avoid the emotional toll that opening and closing school would have taken on our second grader. We really want for both our children to be able to attend in person in the fall and would feel immensely more comfortable if the school set a precedent now of protecting our unvaccinated children despite the relaxing restrictions by the state or the MPA. It feels most reasonable to keep a policy intact that protects the most vulnerable. Additionally, it feels important to consider all children's need for consistency. Changing the mask policy at this stage in the year may introduce new emotional challenges for children who have grown accustomed to feeling safe and protected when wearing masks at school. The next comment I've got to read is from Kristen Erickson. She says, I understand the guidance is changing. However, I believe that masks should still be required outside of school. First and foremost, especially at the elementary and middle school level, students have not been vaccinated. Second, especially of concern is the children's inability to maintain proper social distance. Kids are excited and playing. They will not keep 6 feet apart from one another. That being said, teachers should also continue to wear masks as a lead by example model. Now is not the time to let our guard down. Numbers are still rising, and personally, our family has done everything we can to be safe. Adults are vaccinated, frontline workers. I'm in healthcare. My husband is a butcher. If an outbreak or need to quarantine happens due to changing mask guidelines at school, that will affect my job. I will be forced to take unpaid time off while the kids quarantine because, as a fully vaccinated person, my employer's policy is such that I'm not required to quarantine, and they will not pay me if I need to take time because someone in my home was exposed. I truly believe that it would be irresponsible of the school board to decide to remove any mask mandates at this time. The third comment that was requested was from Debbie Averill. She says, I feel very strongly that especially unvaccinated young people need to continue to wear masks both indoors and outdoors. Currently, Maine is still seeing close to 400 cases a day, and those succumbing to COVID are no longer primarily the elderly. New strains of the virus will continue until we truly have herd immunity, and younger people are being affected by each new strain. Wearing a mask is not a hardship, but rather simple common sense. In a community with so many young people, we need to continue to be vigilant for them, as they often do not have the wisdom to protect themselves. The huge Maine Day gathering yesterday at the Avenue Complex is proof of that. I also believe we have an obligation to protect our school staff members. Even those fully vaccinated can contract the virus and lose valuable instruction time and or wages. I'm unable to attend the meeting as it is scheduled during work hours. All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mark, you had one too?
Yes, this letter is from Rob and Nevis Wheeler. Dear members of the school board and Superintendent Higgins, we would like to voice our opinion about the safety protocols for outdoor sports this spring at Orono High School. Having looked at the science and the CDC guidelines from the national and state level organizations, we agree that the risks of COVID transmission outdoors are low, even without face coverings. We note that the Maine CDC does not distinguish close contact based on face coverings, parentheses due in part to inconsistency in quality and fit, end parentheses. Furthermore, during most outdoor sporting events, athletes are not within 6 feet of one another for longer than 15 minutes, the CDC cutoff for close contact. This would be the case for track and field, tennis, baseball and softball, and most paddling events. Therefore, we would be in favor of having athletes take off their face coverings when playing or practicing and putting them back on when interacting at rest or on the bus. In addition, these more relaxed guidelines can be justified by the increasing vaccination rate for Maine 16 to 19-year-olds, parentheses 31% have had at least one vaccination shot, end parentheses, and by the lack of known transmission during unmasked high school sporting events this past fall. This opinion is in line with the guidance of the Maine Principals Association and Maine CDC. And note that many other local schools have already implemented the new guidelines as of Hamden track meet yesterday. We are comfortable for this email to be read in the school board meeting and to be forwarded along to any other school board members not listed on the recipient list. Sincerely, Rob Wheeler and Eva Stalbo-Wheeler.
Okay, and I will just note that the board has received, gosh, I don't know, a dozen other emails that aren't necessarily going to be read out loud because that wasn't requested, but I want to assure people we got those and read those as well.
Brian, there was one more request for comment in the chat.
Yeah, I see. Thomas, I'm going to cut it off after you because the board does need to get to its own discussion. And I think we've heard quite a bit at this point. But Thomas, if you have anything new to add, go ahead for 2 minutes.
So my name's Thomas Cassidy. I'm an internist. I've actually spent the last year taking care of COVID patients. I do, looking at the federal guidelines, I do wonder whether we should separate out vaccinated versus unvaccinated students and who wears a mask and who doesn't. I just think there's a big difference in risk and transmission. I'm, as an internist that takes care of older people, I'm really worried about that transmission to our older population. And we still have seen some breakthrough disease in our community and even breakthrough fatalities with vaccinated. So I do wonder if you have vaccinated students and separating them out on who would wear a mask and who would not. That's really all I had.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and switch to the board discussion. I don't know, Meredith, did you want to do any introduction? I think such a hot topic. The board's probably up to date on most things, but is there anything you wanted to introduce?
Well, I would just say I put in the chat when we first got started with the meeting, the exact new guidance that came out from MPA. And just to reiterate, because I think some people have joined the meeting since you introduced this, Brian. Today, we're just taking up the topic of the after school events, outdoors, and the MPA guidance. We're not taking up the topic of school day activities because we just need a little more time to talk with staff and bring a recommendation on Tuesday around that. And because we had a lot of events happening, sporting events, we felt like it was timely to go ahead and bring this topic. And so that's why we've separated them. And I after talking with my colleagues in our regional superintendent's meeting yesterday, I can confirm that all of the districts in our region are planning on following MPA guidance, as has been reported anecdotally from the track meet yesterday with a few schools. So that is what's happening around us. And I would also just say that I do think that for me, a guidepost through this entire process has been, following state guidance and trying to follow that with fidelity and to make sure that what we're doing well. And I think there's no shortage of additional information and research and studies that you can use to make decisions. But frankly, for our school district, following the state guidance has really been, I think, the most important thing to our success, and our having plans that I think have support from the larger community. Because I think when we start changing where we pick and choose, we use this guidance for this particular purpose and this other guidance. Now, I think that's difficult for people to trust kind of how we're leading through this. So I do support making adjustments as guidance changes. There's other new guidance that will be changing soon, and we'll have to make adjustments there as well. So I think that's the time that we're in, and I think that's a really positive thing that we're in this time that we can change our framework to the other direction rather than having to become more restrictive. I see that as a really positive sign about how far we've come and where we're headed. So I would just thank everyone for their comments and also thank the board for being willing to come together so that we can work through this issue and give our students and families who are impacted, especially by the after school MPA sponsor programs, some guidance as soon as possible.
Great. So turning to board discussion, I'm going to preview this. Robert's rules is we only discuss motions, but this board is a pretty strong practice of discussion before motions, which I think benefits us because oftentimes a consensus emerges and we're able to get more efficiently to the consensus. But I'm just going to preview that I personally would like to vote on two separate motions. One, to the MPA guidance really has two pieces. One is the piece on student athletes while competing and practicing outdoors, not wearing a mask. And the other is on spectators. I forget exactly how it's phrased, but it's basically spectators at events outdoors being unmasked. So I personally am going to request and ask when it comes to a vote that we decouple those two things. I don't know if the board feels like it's useful to discuss those two things separately, or if we want to just jump into a generic discussion now. I'm happy to go whichever way the board would like to go on that.
I think it would be useful to decouple them because they do have kind of different implications.
I'm seeing a nod from Aaron too. All right, so we'll go ahead and just do the Robert Rules way. I will make a motion that we follow the MPAA. Sorry, I keep adding an extra A. We will follow the MPAA guidelines on student athletes, which allows athletes to go unmasked outdoors while competing or practicing, but all of the remaining rules about on the bench, indoors, et cetera, of wearing a mask remain. So I would make that motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay.
Brian, can I ask you a question about your motion? Does that, you mentioned athletes and spectators, but really there's three categories in the MPA guidance. We've also got coaches and officials. Where are you going to place them?
I'm not aware that the MPA says coaches should unmask. Is anybody aware of? I don't think it specifically mentions coaches, but they do mention benches. So I'm not sure. What do people? The
In the
MPA
youth community sports guidelines, there are two separate revisions on the masking guidelines. And my understanding is the MPA guidance was done to mirror what had been done in the youth community sports guidelines. And in the youth community sports guidelines, officials and coaches are allowed to unmask when they can maintain the appropriate 6 feet of social distance.
All right, I guess I'd modify my motion to include student athletes, coaches, and officials. I think they're a little bit different because, I'll modify my motion in that way. So it applies to following MPA guidance on student athletes, coaches, and officials during competition. That said, I kind of read the guidelines to say we know that students are, when they're competing, are occasionally going to be less than 6 feet, and we're going to be okay with that, but maybe not so much for coaches. But we'll just let that nuance be in the interpretation. So I'll have the motion. You're okay with that, Jake, since you seconded the motion?
The only thing I would add is, did your motion include practices as well?
Yes, it include practice and competition.
Okay, then I will resecond that motion.
Okay, so that's the motion on the floor. Why don't we go ahead and discuss that motion first?
Well, I guess I'll start. I don't have a lot to add to what everybody already added. We received, by my count, or at least I received, 8 emails, and we heard 9 pieces of public comment. And despite my personal opinion that we should follow the revised guidelines of both the Maine CDC and the MPA, the feedback we've gotten from the community so far is 3 to 1 in favor of doing that as well. So I'm not going to sit here and repeat all the good points that I think were already made, but I am fully supportive of following the revisions from the Maine CDC and the MPA regarding the use of facial coverings outdoors.
I'll jump in next. I also support that idea. The close contact is less than 6 feet and 15 minutes. And I think, you can sit here and you can have all these debates about a hitter and a catcher or somebody, first base person trying to hold somebody on first base, or, the start of a race. But when you add in the 15-minute, I think, I forget if we have a 5,000 and a 10,000 in track, but we only have a couple of events that even approach 15 minutes in length. So even by the time you include the start time, I think the science is pretty good that outdoors and almost never approaching 15 minutes and less than 6 feet. And it is a real burden for athletes. I may feel differently about adults sitting on a bench, but it is a real burden for athletes. I think personally, I don't enjoy biking or running with a mask. I do it. I can do it. It's definitely, I think these stories about passing out and things are a little exaggerated, but I don't enjoy it. So it's a real burden on athletes. So, and I think it's scientifically safe. So I support going ahead with that concept as well.
Okay, I have a few things to say. I don't think this was an emergency. And I'm kind of like, why have we had an emergency meeting when we have a meeting on Tuesday? But that being said, I was moved by Liam's, what he had to say. I do agree that I think athletes participating on the field, I don't feel like that's the super high risk thing that I'm worried about. I do really like the idea that he presented, that we still really encourage masking even during practices, but definitely when they're not participating in the sort of high energy thing that we encourage having masks on. I kind of feel like this is the, there's this whole thing with recycling that they only use some of the recycling, but they tell everybody to put everything, like recycling uses went like way up when everybody put all the things in the one no sort bin. It's kind of like that for masks for me, that if we're always telling people to wear masks, they're going to have an easier time. The kids have already been wearing them this whole time. My number one thing that I want right now, and I think that I agree with Leo that anxiety and mental health is our new big thing. I don't think masks are the cause of our anxiety and mental health issues. And I want everybody to stay in school for the rest of this year and be able to go back to school next year. And so I don't want to put that at risk. And I am very concerned that some of these moves forward are going to put that at risk or have the potential to. And that's all I care about, is keeping our kids in the safest place and in the place that's going to benefit them the most. And I think for most of the kids, that's in school. And we need to be very careful about things that we're rolling back that would put that in jeopardy.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I hear a lot of people saying that we should be following the MPA guidelines. Part of the reason that I ran for this position was because I was really not happy with what I saw coming out of the MPA, and because I wasn't really happy with what I saw the board doing when they voted to follow the MPA guidelines. That's the reason I got involved in the first place, as someone other than just someone who commented during public comment section. So for me, that's not really a good rationale, is that we've always followed their guidelines. Let's keep doing that. I think that, likewise, just because everyone else is doing it, we should do it too. Peer pressure is not a good reason to make a health decision. When I was listening to Director Shaw speak about the reason that Maine has relaxed the mask guidelines for outdoor settings, a large part of the rationale was the high proportion of Maine people who are vaccinated now. And the other component was the low risk of transmission in outdoor settings. I don't want to, minimize the fact that there's a low risk of transmission in outdoor settings. That is the case, but there's still a risk. And just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean that you're immune. That is not the case. And so when I think about this, I think a lot about what Aaron was just saying in terms of, we've got 6 weeks of school left. Do we really want to do anything now that's going to jeopardize those last 6 weeks? And, if we have student athletes who have made a decision and whose parents have made a decision that the risk for them of not wearing a mask during a competition is okay. I can respect that. And if those student athletes then went and sat in a classroom with other student athletes who had made the same decision for themselves, and their families had made that decision, I could completely respect that. But that's not the case. We've got a mixed bag, and we've got a lot of students who are going to school and whose parents are very concerned about this. And the emails I got were not 3-1 in favor of following the MPA. In fact, it was skewed very heavily the opposite direction. And there were only 3 people who asked me to read their comments because they couldn't be here. But I got a lot of emails from people just saying, like, we've got to keep the mask guidance in place. And so, I just wonder who we're doing this for. And it sounds like we're doing this for the student athletes. But then the question is, who's going to be impacted? And the answer is everyone who sits in a classroom all day long. And I can't see how we should make a change that disregards the opinions of the career public health scientists at the United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention, who, as of January this year, have been given the ability to voice their opinions freely. When the recommendation is still for unvaccinated people to wear a mask outdoors and when within 6 feet of someone. If this board is willing to differentiate between vaccinated and unvaccinated students, I would be completely on board with saying that vaccinated student athletes do not need to wear a mask. That sounds great to me. But unvaccinated students, I don't feel comfortable having unvaccinated student athletes, being in the direct stream of someone else's breath. Director Shaw talked about thinking about this like secondhand smoke. And if you, happen to pass by someone at the bus stop and they're smoking and you get a little whiff of it for a second, maybe that's not the end of the world. But if you're sitting in a smoke-filled room, you're going to have a lot of exposure. Well, with student athletes, you might be having someone exhale directly into your face. That doesn't seem like it's a good rationale. Doesn't seem like it's a good way to present ourselves in terms of caring for the students. And I just can't see a across the board adoption of the MPA guidelines at this time.
I guess I'm the only one who's chimed in, so I'll go ahead and do so. As will not surprise anyone, I'm fully supportive of adopting the new guidance put forward by the MPA. I would also like to point out that it's not just MPA guidance. This guidance was worked on by the State Department of Community and Economic Development. The Department of Education had a hand in it, as did the Maine CDC. So to say that it's just MPA guidance is simply not true. There are other agencies involved. Yes, right now the federal CDC guidance is different. They differentiate between vaccinated and unvaccinated. However, it was just on Friday that it was intimated that is almost certainly going to change, possibly as early as next week. So they said there's further updates coming there. I fully agree also with Meredith's point that we've followed state guidance throughout. And there's, in my opinion, no reason to change from that right now. And I absolutely think that we're doing this for the student athletes, right? I mean, I think that what we should be doing everything here for is all of the students, right? And student athletes are benefiting from this move if we take it. They're being harmed if we don't. Jess Witham sent us all an email earlier today saying that she had called, I think it was 19 schools to see what they were doing. Every single school, including a number of them in yellow counties, we're following the new revised state guidance, and no one in her call had decided to not do that and go out on their own. And even if, right, and even to bring up the scenario, let's say that a student, an athlete contracts COVID. And again, we have zero evidence of COVID spread during any sporting events at Orono in the fall when everybody was unmasked or during the winter. But let's just say on the off chance they did, in the classroom, they will still be masked. They will still be socially distanced by 6 feet. So I don't see that that's relevant here. So, I mean, I'm fully in support of this. And I hope that that we're all able to support this and move forward.
Any further discussion or motions?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I have a couple questions for Mark, and one is, I guess I'm curious to see, you said that we would be harming the student athletes if we don't adopt this. And I'm just curious how we'd be harming them, because they've been wearing masks for the entire winter season and the spring season thus far. I don't know what the harm is there. I guess the second thing is just a small technicality, is that we're not following 6-foot distancing in the classrooms anymore in the high school. Some of the middle school classes, if that's correct, we've gone down to as little as 4 feet in many cases.
I didn't get the second question. You froze up on that one. So could you repeat that one, please?
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. I don't believe that we're following 6-foot distancing anymore. I believe that we've gone down to, close to 4 feet in many cases.
I'll answer the first one first in terms of kind of harming the students. The same as with Ellen White in her public comment. I was at the track meet yesterday in Hamden, and watching our student athletes run, in particular the distance events, running a mile or a 2 mile in a mask, does not seem like a pleasant experience to me. There was an incident just this week in the state of Oregon where a young student athlete collapsed at the finish line after running the 800, setting the record in the 800, but collapsed nonetheless afterwards. And while we of course can't know to what degree the mask had any impact on that, it's no doubt that there was a negative outcome there. So I do think we're harming the students potentially physically by having them wear a mask, at least in some events. In terms of the second question, I do not know the specifics. I do know that in the high school, I believe Reg said that we had to go in maybe 2 classrooms, if I remember correctly, down to 4.5.
Why don't we
Yeah,
let
he said a
Meredith jump in?
handful. Yeah, he said a handful. I don't know if I think it was 3 or 4. So it's definitely well under majority, and just a few.
And I don't know about OMS either.
Yeah, OMS is at 4.5 everywhere, and some are at 6 and some are at, between around 5. I think there just maybe 1 or 2 places where it's at 4.5.
I can confirm, yes, and it involves our 8th graders, because that's our largest cohort. 2 classrooms, and we do have like sort of an alternate plan. We have 2 classes in the gym that were larger. So, but in the gym we're able to 6-foot space.
I do want to make just one comment about, the whole thing of like everybody else is doing it. I hear that all the time. I mean, I'm a parent. I hear that all the time. Everybody else is doing it. That doesn't affect me and what I'm doing or the decisions that I'm going to make. And I feel like as gatekeepers, we're kind of like parents. We're the gatekeepers of the school here. That's kind of our job. And so what other people are doing isn't going to weigh in on that. So I just want to throw that all aside and try to make a decision based on what we think is best. And there are going to be some people really mad. I have kids who are really mad whenever I say that, but that's still what I maintain. So I'm just going to put that out there too.
I'd like to add, I think what that point means, Aaron, is that we're not doing something that is way outside the norm of what others around us are doing. I think that was probably Mark's point with that comment.
No, and I get that. I mean, I do understand, like, we have lots of school systems and I'm sure they've put some thought into it also. And so I do respect that part of it. But, we have also gone our own way on other things in Orno. That's what makes Orno special, is that we do, really think through things and we can make decisions that are not following the norm. So I'm just trying to think of the whole picture and not think we have to do exactly even what this sort of guideline, like maybe we can make some variation in there too. So I just want us to be thinking in a big picture and outside the box of what our possibilities are.
I think, for me around that point, it's partly what Jake said, but I think it's also about, our students are competing in competitive sports. And if you think it doesn't harm them to have that kind of disadvantage, I think it's not true, especially in, you know, high cardio events. And so I think for them, it's not about, well, everyone else is doing it, why can't I? It's about setting them up for success and to have the best chance to be successful. So I guess I want to make sure that we're not thinking, you know, let's just follow the crowd. That seems like a good approach. We haven't, I mean, we've not gone our own way on a number of things this year. So that's not what this is about for me. But I think it does validate the fact that I think it's important to do this. The fact that we're not going out alone on a limb that feels really shaky, that no one else is feeling comfortable with as well. So I think that's the point for me on, you know, knowing that my colleagues in Penquist also are feeling the same way.
I mean, I think that's where it comes down to me. I actually have no issue with saying for the students while they're participating that they can do that unmasked. I mean, I agree that it's short amounts of time, and I think in most sports it's fairly spaced. I think we have responsible students who, you know, are gonna, you know, and it's set up in such a way. I think my bigger concern is maybe during practices, unless we have some sort of like real recommendation and real thoughts for our coaches on how to make sure we're maintaining distance, because it's during practices that I think there's a lot of drills that aren't quite the same as the actual participation where you're together longer, or you're together closer. So I would feel more comfortable if we actually had a plan in place and we had some guidelines that we were providing to our coaches for practice that was not just sort of a blanket, nobody has to wear masks. So that's where I stand. And I don't know where I would vote on this current motion. I'm still working that out, because it is right now saying just unmasked participation all the time, when I think there are situations that we need to appropriately control mask wearing. So.
Perhaps Mike can address some of that. I mean, I thought the motion said, I remembered that Rachel's not here and I'm supposed to be taking down the motion, even though we're recording. So I was trying to take down what you said, Brian. So maybe you can correct me. I thought you said, except when in close proximity, and you gave some examples, like in the on the sideline, in the locker room, on the bus. And I guess, you know, I think our coaches, what someone said, I forget who said it now, you know, they have their mask or something they just pull right up when they get close. So maybe Mike can address what he foresees as the procedure for that.
I think, we got to rely on a little bit of common sense here too, is that, inside the dugout, on the bus, in the locker room, if today we have practices indoors because we can't practice outside, those masks are going to be on. When they're walking away from the field, going to their car in their parking lot, the masks are going to go back up. Our coaches have been practicing. They've had to reconstruct the way that they conduct practices in terms of drills and setup of drills all year long. Ever since July, we've been under that. So I don't think that's going to be a big concern for our coaching staff. I think they've just been used to thinking outside the box and looking at different ways to get things done in practice time. So, those are the places that I see where the masks are going to have to be on, but we're not going to change our protocols outside right now. We've got benches set outside the dugouts in order to keep the kids away from each other and in distance while the game is going on. So and they know that when they get there, they're going to have to be masked. So I don't see us because we're allowing these kids to remove their masks while they're competing or practicing. We're not going to change our protocols, outside and just start going back to the way it was. This is just one accommodation that we're making that's going to allow our kids to play on a level playing field and be able to practice and compete at the level that they're capable of competing with.
I'm going to guess that discussion probably is not changing people's minds at this point. I did hear two things that could qualify as amendments pertaining to vaccinations and pertaining to distinguishing practice. Going to make either one of those amendments, but everybody on the board has a right to make an amendment to the motion if they wish to, or to motion for an amendment, and then we'll discuss it.
I guess then I would motion for an amendment to change what we're voting on to say that it applies to vaccinated students.
Okay, is there a second? All right, not hearing a second. Is there any other motion? All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the vote then unless somebody objects. So the motion again is to adopt MPAA guidelines, and this has been our practice all year, is to tie ourselves to a guideline, because otherwise we could end up writing 20-page motions as our guidelines. But to adopt the MPAA guidelines, specifically the first bullet point, which is pertaining to athletes, coaches, and officials, and limited only to the times of competition and active practice. And the guideline does go on to specify that when they can't maintain 6 feet distance and benches and inside and everything is masked. So that's the motion. Go ahead and take a vote. Aaron?
Aye, and I'm really counting on you, Mike, and coaches to do it. I believe you'll do what you say.
Jake is next.
Aye.
And Patrick?
Nay.
Okay, Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. So I know there were something like 10 competitions between now and Tuesday. So that's, that's up to the administration, but they now have the go ahead to do that in the context of the motion. So for the next one, it's pertaining to spectators. I'll explain my rationale in a minute. And my understanding is this applies to only one home event between now and Tuesday. I'm going to make a motion to table consideration of the second bullet point of the MPA guidelines pertaining to spectators until the Tuesday board meeting, with the understanding the current practice of requiring masking continues until then. Is there a second?
Right now, the motion is to table this discussion.
That's right. So nothing would change between now and Tuesday, where we would discuss it again, along with discussing some other outside mask issues.
I second.
Okay, so that's the motion. I'll go ahead and go first. Everybody keeps referencing how we got here. I think everybody's doing that because we got to a really good place. And so that's both a good argument and also, quite frankly, it is a good logic, I think. But to me, how we got here is two ways: is we follow guidelines and we've taken a slow and steady approach. And as far as following the guidelines, when the US and Maine CDC guidelines match up, we've always followed them. When they differ, we have sometimes split the difference. For example, Maine CDC allowed students to be 3 feet, but we chose to never, that's a good case of splitting the difference, right? We tried to keep 6 feet. We allowed less than 6 feet, but we never approached 3 feet. So, and also Maine CDC guidelines, we've been green the entire time, which could have allowed us full return. That would have contradicted we definitely could have done it with 3 foot, but we couldn't have done it with 6 foot or 5 foot. So I think, when the Maine and US guidelines align, we've always followed them. That's, when people say follow the science, but when they differ, we've taken our own choices, and indeed written into everything from state law to these guidelines, there is an option for local districts to behave differently. To be perfectly honest, I don't know how I'm going to vote next Tuesday. I want to hear more from the community. I would personally like to see the state of Maine firm up their definition of what it means to be able to avoid close contact outside. They haven't really put any flesh on that concept. And I would also like to hear more from the school administration, exactly how committed and how we're actually going to enforce 6 feet distancing among spectators if we let them take their masks off. I think that's a much harder thing to police, and I would really like to hear a convincing story about how we're going to do that for next Tuesday. So I literally have my mind unmade up, but I'm going to go with the second principle that's of how we got here, which is to go slow and steady, to have time for consultation with the community, to listen to the community, to give administrators time to implement things. And so I'm going to go with that slow and steady. I just, it's literally one home event. I don't, and we're now talking about grownups who are more or less, you know, sitting. I don't think it, and they've been wearing masks for 9 months. I don't think it's a huge hardship for them to wait until Tuesday. And I think slow and steady has been a really big part of how we've gotten here. And I share, you know, I obviously thought it was worth the Friday meeting for the student athletes, but I don't feel that urgency for people sitting in the audience. I think, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth for this particular context, but I've heard in the past one of our principals say, well, adults keep saying the sports are for kids, then we should make sure that we're doing things for the kids, but we don't have the same obligation to adults. So I'm going to go for a little more slow and steady, at least waiting until Tuesday. I don't know where we're going to end up on Tuesday. It's going to depend on what we hear, but that's why I would like to take some more time and treat this as less of an emergency for adults as spectators. So that's my own thought. What do other people think?
So if we table this, then the one home event, everybody will still have the same policy that we have had, where you must be masked to be on the, you know.
That's correct.
I mean, it certainly doesn't rise to the same level as the student athletes for sure. I do, and I totally appreciate, Brian, the fact that we want to take a little bit of more time on this since we're able to, right? Because it's not a whole bunch of sporting events between now and the next board meeting on Tuesday. I think for me, a big part of this, in addition to kind of following the guidance and recognizing that the risk of outdoor transmission is pretty low. I mean, there's been a number of public health officials have come out over the past, few 2 or 3 months and said, that it's probably even much lower than that initial January or December, I think, study showed. But anyway, I'm fine, I think, with waiting until Tuesday. I do worry a little bit, and I'd like to hear, I think, from Mike, obviously maybe now, but certainly before next Tuesday, because the onus is going to fall primarily on Mike and his staff of how they would think about policing this, right? And that's going to be, I think, a real big problem. And I'm hesitant. I mean, I know it's a JV, I believe it's a JV and a varsity softball game would be the events that would be impacted by this. If we wait until Tuesday, right? Those are the 2 events I think that are taking place before our next board meeting, at home at least. But there's going to be fans there, and I worry about putting our staff in that position. So I don't, in principle, I'm okay with waiting, but I would like to just kind of hear Mike's thoughts on that, if he's willing to share them.
I just want to point out that there is a middle school game as well before.
Okay. So Steve's thoughts as well as the middle school lady, I think would be important for us to hear.
So before they do, can I confirm that it's in fact 3 home events until we meet on Tuesday? Is that correct? 2 high schools.
Sounds like it.
Okay.
Before they speak, I've had some time to think about this because Brian and I had some discussion, and one thing I would say is I think we're going to be policing it either way. We're going to be policing it if we say no masks, and we're going to policing it if we're going to have to police it if we say you have to mask, because I think the assumption that especially visitors will make, and others who walked through town to the game unmasked and come to the game, now you have to mask up. I think it's going to lead us to policing it regardless of what decision is made. So I would just put that out there that we have a task ahead of us either way. And there's no way around that. But I think, one of the things we've already started with is we've ordered some signs. Whether or not we'll get to use those signs, I guess, is before us, we don't know yet. But putting up signage, sending out information to our families who attend games, sending it out to visiting ADs, and they would share it with their families. And then, having to keep an eye out for it. And I guess I'm most concerned about us watching out for our students. That's where I'm most concerned about making sure that people are following that distancing. for some of the very reasons that some of you mentioned. Just we want to make sure that our students are safe when they're on our campus, and that, you know, what's coming back into our schools has been practicing safe distancing. So I just wanted to respond before we turn it over to Mike and Steve for that.
Yeah,
Meredith, I'm sorry, can I just ask a clarifying question? Do you know, I know you said that all the districts in the Penquist region are going to follow the MPA guidelines around the athletes. Did they talk about spectators? I mean, are they all following the main CDC guidelines about, you know, letting spectators unmask if they can maintain 6 feet of social distancing, or are they split, or what's the word on that?
I believe they're all moving toward to the guidance. When we asked the question on that, no one said they were not. But no, you know, we only had a few districts who, for that, said, well, we're definitely. And then we said, well, is anyone not doing that? And no one spoke up. So for the people that were there, which were, I don't know, probably 3/4 of our region.
Yeah, I think all the guidance, whether it's sports related, the MPA or the community and education, economic development, or if it's town of Orono ordinance and the state of Maine guidance, it's unmasked, but 6 feet. And if you can't maintain 6 feet, you're still supposed to put a mask back on. And that's, you know, I hear you, Mark, about the policing, and I don't want to make Mike into a policeman, because I know that's not why he got into education and athletic direction. But I feel really strongly, if we're taking masks off, we got to start enforcing the 6 feet, especially as Meredith said, with our students. And that's a whole different kind of policing. And quite frankly, I think it's a harder kind of policing. Are we going to, you know, walk down a line and ask people, are you related? Are you not related? Show me your drive. I'm joking at this point. Are you going to show me your driver's ID? Right. The 6 feet is a much harder thing to enforce. And so everybody in this state and country knows how to follow a mask in 6 feet. And when that 6 feet turns into 3 feet with a mask, I don't get nervous. But when it turns into 3 feet without a mask, I get nervous. And I would, you know, it is the guidance in the law, and I would expect us to be enforcing it, especially as students. And I just think that's the harder job and needs more time. But I would like to hear from Mike and Steve what they're thinking on, you know, enforcing masks, enforcing 6 feet with spectators.
Mike, if I could just go real quick. So we had a game yesterday, and of course, right after the CDC announced this, you know, all kinds of schools stopped wearing masks. So we were in Bangor, and there were a lot of parents that wore masks. There were some parents that took their masks off, but they are all distanced. I think they did a great job, and I don't think the opposing AD was really policing it. I think the parents took it upon themselves to stay you know, spread out. And as far as like other schools, so Mike and I, we send out to every AD our protocols, and we receive other schools' protocols. So we know what our fans can do at each and every school that we play, and vice versa. So I don't think it'll be a problem. I would think you guys would want to make this decision tonight, because it sounds like Tuesday's meeting is going to be a lot longer, especially tackling the recess issue. But Mike, you can add.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. You know, we had you know, we had an event last night. I had been in previous contact with Matanock Academy to let them know that we were not, at that time, we had not had an opportunity to make a decision. So respectfully asked that their athletes would wear their masks while they're going to compete. And I say ask, I mean, they were going to have to. And also too, to make sure that, you know, it's not a huge crowd at tennis matches, that any parents or spectators that would be coming down from Matanock, that they would respect our rules and mask. So, you know, I agree with Meredith. It's going to be very difficult for Steve and I, because, you know, for me, there are going to be days where I have tennis, baseball, and softball going on at the same time. And to be able to be at all three, you know, particular fields, obviously I can't at once. Obviously I can walk back and forth, and but you know, I don't go out. You know, that's part of the enjoyment of the day for me, and as an athletic administrator, is to go out and I enjoy going out and talking with people and watching the kids play and compete. And, I feel like it could be a stretch of constant conflict, and we'll deal with conflict, but I don't think any of us want to go out and be looking for it all the time.
Thank you. Other board, so again, the motion would be to defer any action on the second half of the MPA guidance until Tuesday, which means existing practice of requiring masks stays in place, masks and 6 feet for that matter, but masks until Tuesday, at which point we would discuss it again. Any other input?
Well, I will say, I agree with Mark that the emergency aspect of this meeting was much more about the athletes than it was about the spectators. So, I'm fine waiting till Tuesday to make that decision. But as I think about it out loud right now, the state of Maine no longer requires the use of facial coverings in outdoor spaces when we can maintain 6 feet of social distancing. The town no longer requires it. And it sounds like all of the other towns around us are not going to require it either. So I'm not sure, why we think that we need to do that. I mean, we'll discuss it more on Tuesday, but those are my initial thoughts on it.
If I could just add real quick, my apologies, but we're talking about the group that is the highest vaccinated group that we're trying to put this decision off of. I mean, I would think the majority, the higher percentage of people that are going to be coming and spectating are vaccinated. So, to me, then it becomes an issue of just making sure that people are using their common sense and judgment and cooperating with us on our facility, because they, a lot of people have said to me in these contests that I've covered is that we're willing to do anything we have to do so that these kids can have an opportunity to play. And I think that's the way that that we need to take it too, is that I think that the general person realizes how much these kids have had taken away from them over these last 14 months. And, they're willing to do what they have to do. And, so I'm hoping that stays true.
Yeah, I want to throw out that I've been to one event since our last meeting. And 1 minute after I got into the event, the first conversation I heard was someone saying, "Oh, this was not a school event. It was another sporting event." The first conversation was, "You can take your mask off. We don't have to have them on anymore. You should take it off." And then the person did and said, "Isn't it great to be vaccinated?" And the other person said, "Oh, I'm not getting vaccinated. I'm waiting for something." And then they went and sat in a dugout 2 feet apart for the whole rest of the time. And then 3 other people went and sat with them. And that I was like, this is my first exposure to this new mandate coming out. And nobody, adults don't always use the best common sense and don't always, for me, I was like, this already makes me worried and uncomfortable for the bigger picture. It was my first exposure. So maybe that makes a negative impact on how I feel about it, but that's what I already saw in 1 day.
The other thing I will add is, just like with the athletes, if they're not comfortable unmasking, they don't have to. It's the same thing with the spectators. If they're not comfortable unmasking, they're welcome to wear a mask as well.
Jake, the thing about that is when you're asking people to mask, it's not the person who's wearing the mask you don't get the benefit from wearing the mask. You get the benefit from the person next to you wearing the mask. That's the way this works. Unless someone's got an N95 respirator, which is actually filtering out the air, the primary benefit is because, if I'm sitting next to Erin and she's got COVID, if we're outside, and she coughs, well, all those big droplets are getting stuck inside her mask, and the small aerosols that do escape through the sides, those get blown away in the wind. But with masking, you're really talking about being protected from someone who's sick, not getting a benefit yourself. I just saw there was a comment asking for the science behind it. That just has to do with, you can go back and look at all the CDC data on how masks work. And as a healthcare provider, that's what all of the, mask data, that's why I wear an N95 mask while I practice every single time, I see a patient. The masking guidelines that have been in place in healthcare since the 1980s were never there to protect the doctors from the patients being sick. They were there to protect the patients from the doctor who's sick. That's why the doctor wears a mask. So there's a lot of research behind that.
Well, I'll just kind of throw just couple things out there. One, I think this touches in a little bit with what Meredith said and also with what Jake said. And again, I know we're going to do more of this on Tuesday, but I do think it's worth pointing out that the town has already voted to adopt the new state guidance town-wide, right? And so if we have people here coming to town and they're downtown before they come up to a sporting event and they're able to maintain their 6 feet of distance, they're unmasked, then they're going to get to the game and they're going to be told that that's different on the campus. And I think that's certainly a concern that we need to have. I will also say in the volunteer work that I do with youth sports in Orono, I made sure to check in with the town on the new guidelines before I told any of my coaches or parents or players what was going to be the case for events that are starting tomorrow. And the fire chief, Jeff Lowe, who is in charge of COVID response to the town of Orono, said, nope, we are fully on board with the new state guidance, and you can follow that for all town facilities as you go about your various sporting events. So the town is fully on board, and I think it's safe to say the town of Orono has been, if anything, probably more cautious than RSU 26 has been throughout this, including maintaining the town office closed for a lengthy period of time. So I think that's worth pointing out. And then I do also think, and I don't have to study at my fingertips, I'd have to go back and search for it, but I do believe that there's been at least one, if not more than one study over the last few months showing that while the primary benefit of the mask is to prevent the spread of COVID from the wearer, that there is also a benefit to the wearer of the other side of that. There is a benefit from wearing the mask and preventing stuff from getting through. So I don't think it's true to say that the benefit is only for the person wearing it to prevent them from spreading it. I do believe that there's a couple of studies shown that there is a admittedly smaller, but there is also a benefit in blocking from wearing it. So to say that, I don't believe is accurate.
Okay, I'm going to say we have tons of things that are policies that we don't allow at our school that they allow in town. You can't smoke on the campus of the school. You can smoke until you get to school, then you've got to put it out. You can't have peanuts in the middle school and high school. You can eat a peanut butter sandwich other places. I mean, I think we are well within our rights to have rules that are not, that are campus wide and not anywhere else. And I know you're not saying that, but just saying like in the bigger picture. So for me, I think it's the mask thing for spectators. For me, it's much easier to see someone and say they have a mask on and they're meeting our guideline than to say they don't have a mask on and they're standing too close together. Then, that's a much harder thing to enforce and to control. To me, it's like the mask is like a black, white, yes, no, you have it, you don't have it. Anybody could say, and I've had people come and tell me things when I've walked a dog through a sporting, besides sporting event, someone come and say, you're not supposed to have your dog on the campus. So that's something that anybody could walk up and say, I'm sorry, you don't have a mask on, it's our rule, would you mind going to the car or getting one? I feel like that's more that everybody can enforce it, while like standing too close together is something that we would have to have a much more sophisticated plan in place. So, and I know we're now having the whole discussion about whether we're doing it. So I don't know if we should just vote on it today because we've already just had the discussion.
We are diving into the science. Yeah, I mean, for
Ryan,
me,
can I just say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Last thing is it for Steve and I, guys, it's gonna be conflict either way, right? So I mean, if we meet people at the gate and greet them and say you have to have a mask, and all of a sudden it becomes confrontational, then that's what it is. And we've had that happen, before. So, and then the other part is that if we allow fans to spectators to go without masks, are we expected to, now we see two people standing beside each other, and is it going to be up to Steve and I to go up to those two people and say, are you related? Do you live in the same household? If you don't, can you get 6 feet apart? And is that the best use of our I don't know, of our skill sets and is that the way that we want to spend or that we would have to spend the every afternoon. I've got home events Monday through Saturday next week. So it's either way.
And I would just say if the state of Maine is not trying to, ask law enforcement to ask those questions of residents, if the town of Orono is not asking, our law enforcement to do that, I just have to ask, why are we, right? Why are we doing that step that no one around us is doing, and to what end? And I think it's to be protective. And I guess I would just say, if there's a season in sport that it's the right time to make this move, this is it. I mean, there is a lot of room to spread out events, and I just have to think, what are we trying to protect people from as spectators here? And I just think personal responsibility has to come into this in our state, in our town, at events. And it just feels a little bit like we're trying to just have a bubble here that no one else around us is trying to have, and I wonder why. Is there something? I'm not seeing anything in our school community that is concerning to me right now, and I think we've done really well all year, and I guess I don't see the benefit of doing this myself. So I will just say that.
Meredith, I would respond to that and say that the majority of the comments that I've received have been people who are not involved in athletics, but are not comfortable sending their kids to school in an environment where athletics are becoming much more permissive than the rules that we have in school. Both parents and community members who don't have kids are basically saying, wait a minute, why are spectators at athletic events following rules that are different than the rules that we follow during the school day? And they're saying, because those athletes go back into classrooms with the other kids. This is about protecting the community as a whole. And yes, I recognize there are a lot of people that think we're being overprotective. But there's also a lot of people that feel like the standard should be the same across the board, and that what we're doing in school is good, and that there's only 6 weeks left in the school year, and that now's not the time to change. Let's keep it as is, wait and see what happens over the summer, and reevaluate for the fall semester. So that's where I'm coming from with my approach here. That's the way I feel, but it's also the way a lot of people who have contacted me feel. And we're talking about education. We're not, for me, athletics are secondary, and education is number one. And if something we do around athletics means that there's a parent that says, I'm not comfortable sending my kid to in-person learning anymore, then that's a problem. And so that's kind of where this is coming from for me.
I mean, I can say for me, first, Mike, no, I don't want you to be policing, but I will say I have a soccer game that I attended in the fall in mind, where I believe the students probably weren't technically supposed to be there in the fall, and they probably went around the side or something. But I watched 15 of our students sitting shoulder to shoulder to shoulder at the sideline of a game. I don't really want Steve and Mike to be going up to adults and enforcing things, but I do think that was a problem, and I want to hear more about how that looks like this spring. So for me, I come back to I'm not supporting or opposing right now, what we do with spectators in the long run, but I do think that we should, number one, a big part of our process has been to just take a little time to think things through. And where was I headed with the second point? Oh, the second point, Patrick touched on it a bit. I think it's important that we don't somehow privilege sports. I heard on Tuesday about a bunch of events that were going to be held, end of year events that were going to be outdoors with a mask. And I haven't heard how those have been, have those changed or not changed? I don't know. It's not on the agenda. We don't need to talk about it today. We shouldn't talk about it today, but I'd kind of like to hear our thoughts on that and weigh that at the same time that I'm weighing spectators. Athletes who are running are a different story, but I'd like to hear that and weigh that at the same time that I'm weighing, people sitting on the sidelines at a game. And, and there's class, we have outdoor class, we have other situations that are during the school day that are academic. And so to me, there's just a little bit of this rush. I was happy and I helped facilitate the rush for the student athletes, but for the adults, I just don't feel the same rush. And I actually think it's a bad signal to be privileging sports over and above all of the other questions that are going to come up around this, around academics and end of year events. Outdoor mass, and I'm not even for privileging those. And mostly, I just think a little more time would be helpful on this. So that's my position.
Could I just ask a clarifying question, Brian? And I think this also goes back to something that Patrick said. I'm just a little confused as to how we are privileging sports or athletes here, because I don't see this going that way. So I guess I'd like a little elaboration on that.
Well, I don't think we're privileging athletes because I think they're in a different circumstance, but somebody sitting at a graduation is not, in my mind, outdoor graduation is not very different from somebody who's sitting watching a sports event. And I don't know what the outcome for that, but to me, they're identical situations. And so it makes sense to talk about them at the same time, which we're not really set to do to talk about it yet. So to me, they're identical situations, and it feels weird to talk about one before we talk about the others. Also feels bad because it sets us up to be inconsistent. Whereas if we talk about them at the same time, it sets us up to be consistent.
Mark, what I was talking about with privileging athletes is if we have one set of rules for gym class and one set of rules for, track after school, that is privileging the athletes who are participating in track rather than, saying we're going to have one set of standards for athletics. Is what I've said before. If those students were in separate classes, which I'm not advocating for, that would be a different thing. But you're basically allowing one set of parents to make a risk decision that then impacts the rest of the students in the class when they go back to the classroom the next day.
We haven't made that decision yet on any outdoor educational activities because we said we were going to do that on Tuesday. And so to prejudge what that decision is going to be is probably not the best thing ever, but we haven't made that choice. And so according to Brian, we're going to deal with that on Tuesday, what we're going to do with outdoor classrooms, outdoor PE. So I would firmly disagree that we're privileging athletes here. I think that is fundamentally incorrect and not at all fair.
I agree. I mean, but if you take what I'm saying to its conclusion, I want to make the same conclusion for both those groups, right? I'm not talking about athletes that are competing. I'm talking about parents watching athletes and parents sitting at graduation and outdoor gyms. And I don't know how you end up with a consistent result if you don't consider them at the same time.
I would agree with that. I think that's fair because I would agree with you that sitting at an outdoor graduation is exactly the same thing as sitting at an outdoor sporting event. What I wouldn't want though is if, let's say, our administrators aren't ready to have that conversation on Tuesday, are we then going to punt on this decision on outdoor sports spectators again? I mean, I don't know, right? If they're going to be or not going to be. I would agree with you that they're the same thing. I would say sitting in for watching an outdoor performance of drama or a show choir performance or an orchestra performance. I think they're all the same, right? I mean, I think all co and extracurriculars should be treated the same. And so, but I'm a little worried that maybe we won't be ready to discuss graduation on Tuesday. Maybe we will be. I don't know. But I wouldn't want an unreadiness to do that to hold up a decision on this any further. Although I do agree with you. I think they are the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. At that point, you can see it as we have an opportunity to solve one earlier. So glass half full, half empty, whether it's privileging it or just taking an opportunity to deal with it earlier. But personally, I feel more comfortable at least taking a stab at trying to deal with them at the same time. Any other thoughts? Or are we ready to vote? This has certainly turned into a longer meeting than anticipated, but it's been robust conversation, a lot of public input, so it's all good.
Can we, given the amount of time we've taken discussing this, can we repeat the motion before us?
Yes, so the motion is to table meaning to defer and take up on Thursday. The second half of the MPA guidance about spectators, which leaves in place current guidelines, which
You mean-
involves masks for spectators.
You mean Tuesday?
Tuesday, yes, sorry, did I say Thursday? Yep, Tuesday, our next board meeting, which is Tuesday.
My concern with putting off the vote is just that I almost feel like, it's that consistency thing for Mike and Steve of knowing what the policy is going to be and being able to enforce it and not have, these few events and then changing. And I know we're all flexible and we've been changing, but I almost feel like we should just vote on this. And we've had this big discussion. I feel like we're just going to have it again. Now, maybe something will come out. I mean, I do think there's things coming out. I didn't want to actually have this meeting tonight because I felt like there was a lot of things still happening and coming out. But if we're already here and we've already had this discussion, I almost feel like we should just vote.
Well, can I say I am very sensitive to Brian's comment about giving the public opportunity to weigh in on the spectator aspect of it and the outdoor classroom aspect of it and graduation aspect of it and whatever other outdoor aspects we can tackle on Tuesday. We obviously had a lot of emails and a lot of public comment around this specific subject, so I'd expect we're going to if we wait till Tuesday as well. And I'd like to hear what the public has to say about it.
I'm open with that. I do think that we didn't give a lot of people time to speak, and we put it this meeting is at a time where a lot of people couldn't come. So
well,
I'm fine with putting it off.
And I think honestly, and no disrespect to you, Brian, but I think the fact that you decoupled it really took a lot of people by surprise, especially after the fact that we decoupled it after public comment, not giving people the opportunity to comment on it.
Yeah, that's fair. All right.
I think we should just vote then.
All right, so the motion on the floor is to defer the discussion till Tuesday, not changing policy until then. Go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. All right, I think we're ready to adjourn unless somebody's got something else. I motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? We'll vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Motion's adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for showing up.